What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. More Birthright domain reviews here. We are going to cover the last of the political domains here for the Eastern Marches and kind of save the best for last in some ways. The biggest one, certainly, as far as our actual coverage here. This is the only sort of double page one that we get here, and that is the also single and sole dwarven realm for us. That's Baruk-Azhik. So these guys are lawful good. Again, only dwarven realm, so if you're looking for something unique compared to all the other human and other non-human domains that are playable, this is definitely for you. Obviously, if you like dwarves, well, this is going to be the domain for you, although you could try and playing either the temple or guild of the dwarves here, which we'll cover when we get to the very end of the Eastern Marches, so you do have some options there, but again, that would be non-political domains. But Baruk-Azhik, again, lawful good, and as the description says, right, it is a good example of a dwarven domain because it's, again, pretty much the only dwarven domain. So it is a fairly decently sized territory, although not overly huge compared to something like, let's say, Avenel or Gore. But you have 5 provinces, 3 of which are pretty well settled, right? You got 2 4s and a 5 there, with Rivenrock being the capital. And then the other 2 smaller ones, 3 6. So there's still a fair bit of magical potential in the land as well, which, as you can see, it hasn't been tapped by anybody, but that could be a bargaining chip if the dwarves can find a suitable ally for that. So structurally, the domain's kind of interesting too. So you as the ruler, the Overthane, if you're choosing to play as the existing character here, Graybeard, was a pretty badass character overall, but you obviously you run the domain itself, but you specifically have direct control over the capital province, and then a different Thane runs each other province, and they're basically like the head of their own clan. So you have basically 4 other clans that take care of the individual territories for you. So law here is pretty simple. It's all you. Temples. Morden's Forge is the one recognized religion. The dwarves don't worship other gods. So again, very simple there. So in comparison to a lot of the other domains that have a lot of internal conflicts, internal instabilities, the dwarves, not so much. It's more external and existential in some ways, which we'll get to. The guild situation, Dirk Watershold, again, pretty powerful thief if you want to play as the leader of his guild here. But, overall pretty good character here, but he is controlling most of the trade here, although you do have Morel Lanneman and of Morid and Elamian Lamier of Elenier do have some holdings here as well. But again, I wouldn't say it's as cutthroat as in some of the other guild situations where it's a little more complicated. But the dwarves do need to try to build more trade ties with other nations, so in other words, non-dwarves, but given their sort of trust issues as far as building those relationships goes, it's a little bit tougher. So again, the dwarves aren't very trusting of the outside domains in this setting, certainly. So, but if they want to gain some actual allies, they're going to have to, something's going to have to budge there, but we'll jump more into that a little bit later. And as we said, no mage draws any power from sources here, so whether that's by design from the dwarves or just no mages tried, in either case, there's, again, wide open potential there, and could be something that the dwarves use as a bargaining tool to gain maybe a powerful ally. So Regency got a fair bit here. Treasury is also very strong. 40 gold bars is nothing to sneeze at, certainly, and will let you start immediately working on improving things in the domain and accomplishing what you want to accomplish. So naturally, Baruk-Azhik protects itself with an all-dwarf army. The dwarves do insist on receiving some payment for their services, but basically they just take minimal payments. So most units actually concentrate on maintaining security around the Orog tunnels and not necessarily ready themselves for an invasion from outside. So that being said, you don't really have anybody who's threatening to invade outside of maybe like the Gorgon or something like that. But that'd be a separate issue, really, because that's going to affect everybody. But anyway, the existing or starting army that you have are 4 units of dwarf guards, which are very powerful, and then also dwarf crossbows, again, very solid troops there. So, and a sizable army without, threatening anybody, but again, a lot of that's concentrated underground to deal with the Orogs. The cool thing is here, though, if somehow somebody decided to declare war against you, maybe you were going on a campaign yourself, basically 2 more units of each type become available 1 war move after war is declared, as the dwarves leave their labor in droves to defend their beloved lands. But so basically you can go from 8 units to 12 very, very quickly here without having to pay anything extra, which is pretty cool. That being said, at some point you may want to certainly try increasing the size of your forces, or maybe even hiring some mercenaries just to whatever your goals for your specific campaign are, but it doesn't hurt to necessarily increase that if possible. So if you again decide to play as the existing regent, who's got a pretty cool story as well, Grim Graybeard. So he's a fighter priest, pretty good levels there, 7 and 8, and a good bloodline. Seems a dour dwarf. Whose main concern in life is the genocide of the Orogs under the Iron Peaks. So that is, again, the very real and ongoing sort of secret underground war that's happening there that the dwarves are primarily concerned with. So he acts friendly to proven friends of the dwarven cause and supports his people's ventures enthusiastically, but finds little reason to seek companions outside his race. He does not disdain humans, but he wants them to prove themselves, basically, before he trusts them with anything of value. So he has known some excellent humans in his time, and part of the mission that he gives his trading parties is to basically scout for future allies. So, and that's, again, something that I think is going to be a wise move, is to gain some valuable allies here, because, again, the dwarves just don't have the numbers to deal with the essentially endless horde of Orogs, and really can't focus on much of anything else while that is still a serious concern. So he does have some pretty solid lieutenants here, 4 lieutenants, basically the thanes of the other provinces. So, he has those as perfect allies here, basically. So they're all on board here. Again, there's not really much in the way of internal friction here with the dwarves, where you might have that with all the scheming and stuff of some of the other domains we've covered. Another important ally here is, again, Dirk Watershold, so with 2 eyes as it specifies here. The dwarf most likely to encounter outsiders. So again, he's the head of the trading guilds and also a spy master as well. So, and he's got a fairly decent network here in the Eastern Marches. So another important figure, and certainly we want to maintain good relations with as well. As one might expect of a dwarven kingdom, its mountainous, snow-covered peaks and gorges mark the terrain, defying anyone who would traverse it. The air feels crisp and thin in the upper reaches, and wind can chill the traveler to the bone. Rivers race through the ravines, carving their way through the rock as they've done for millennia. Hardy aspens cling to the earth, and shrubs cover the entire landscape. The Iron Peaks protect neighboring Canasi from the worst of the Anwiran weather, which means your domain is, again, getting basically the brunt of all that weather. So the dwarves have done little to mar the outer surface of the mountains. Instead, everything's concentrated within, as you might expect. So each province has one such fortress, the home of a single clan. Though the crags outside may grow rough and battered, the interiors are marvels. Most folks know dwarves as masters of stonework, but they have no idea how the race has consummated its art in these fortresses. Great stone blocks hold together with hardly a crack to mark their joining. The ceilings and pillars of the common areas gleam, so well burnished that the rock itself seems to glow. The living quarters and temple areas are places that humans, however trusted, may never see. So again, it would be certainly a very special and honored occasion if the dwarves somehow allowed you to do that. Even so, to lay eyes upon a room beyond the entry hall of a clan's holding is an honor greater than most Anwirians ever enjoy. So, something then, again, as a ruler there, that you'd want to sort of work into your relations with outsiders is certainly, again, they're going to have to prove themselves to you. The capital itself, Stone's Rejoicing, is in Ravenrock, and that is the one that you rule personally. So all matters of justice, basically, that the Thanes can't handle or any other issues, really come to you here. So also the center of trade, as you might expect. Trade goods, then, as you can also kind of expect, would be highly sought after by outsiders, but they only leave the kingdom infrequently, because the dwarves tend to basically, again, in this setting, in this particular domain, right, everything's kind of internal, because, again, they just haven't found that many worthy allies that they trust enough to share all their goods with in that sense. However, you do have trade routes that lead down to Rorven in Cornace and Shieldhaven in Moriad, and a secret road runs through the Seal Road into its capital, and so, again, you have a interesting relationship there with the elves for some trade. Other trade routes include one into Moriel and one all the way actually down to Ilion, which is a pretty impressive distance there. So that being said, it's a good amount of trade, but it's certainly something that you would want to, I think, increase just to make sure that your economy for your domain is just humming along and you're making all kinds of gold, which will then hopefully allow you to go on and expanding certainly the army a little bit, and also some other projects, I think, just to, again, diversify the domain a little bit and at some point work on a solution towards dealing with the Orogs once and for all. Now this, like the Seal Woad, is actually one of the domains that received one of the player's guides to the domain, so we're going to definitely review that at some point, which really will give us a much deeper insight into what we've gotten here, and there's just a lot of great information there. And some already sort of pre-made adventure hooks and things that, again, will make a campaign in and around here very fruitful. So, allies and enemies, you don't really have any true allies. That being said, again, you have some tentative trade connections here. Play those up and maybe find some more of the allies. So again, and this is really, the allies part again is just it's a trust issue. You know, the dwarves are too proud to ask for human help. And then the humans would like to, but they kind of fear of offending the dwarves. So again, there's just not enough sort of cultural connection between the two, or any kind of solid connection. So if that can be, that should be one of your sort of foreign policy goals for your domain here, is finding a way to overcome these issues just as a pragmatic issue, if nothing else, just because, again, the humans can also supply the numbers to help possibly somehow deal with the Orogs as well. Enemies. So again, outside of the Orogs, there's really no mortal enemies, although the dwarves of Mor-Kalad under the domination of the Gorgon, that is definitely a sour point there. So, as it says here, a Baruk-Azhik dwarf will attack a Mor-Kalad dwarf on sight, basically just trying to beat them back into the ground. Naturally, Mor-Kalad dwarves feel wary of entering battle involving other dwarves. So yeah, that's definitely a issue there. So you have, again, the Orogs underground, your neighboring dwarf realm there to deal with. So, but again, how aggressively you want to pursue that, at least initially, is again, maybe not, it's maybe advised not to be so aggressive there, just with, again, you know, if you decide to deal with Mor-Kalad, you know, you got Mar-Khazor next to it as well. Not that they necessarily care what happens to those dwarves, but, you know, they're both puppet kingdoms of the Gorgon, and really anything you do to draw his attention is not going to be good news for you and neighboring realms as well. Lastly, special conditions. So the Orogs under the Iron Peaks grow ever more powerful with every year, basically. So, and really you just don't have, again, the numbers, right? Every dwarf that dies is, you know, that's a somewhat irreplaceable person, whereas the Orogs are essentially, you know, limitless. So again, there's going to have to be a serious plan devised to somehow decimate the Orogs enough to where they're not a threat for a good long time, so that, again, the domain can focus on other things. Because, again, as it says here, the population of Baruk-Azhik declines steadily each year, and the Orogs just continue to grow. So Graybeard has kind of begun here is thinking of this solution of basically just in force sweeping through and killing off all the Orogs, or as many as possible. Now, naturally, that's going to incur a lot of dwarf losses along the way, which, again, are going to be sorely felt. But at least he believes that could end the Orog threat for now. That being said, again, that's where, you know, at least in my opinion, if you're running this domain, strongly advised in cultivating some other allies. You know, you've got all kinds of gold, hire mercenaries, figure out something there. You know, people are all too happy to accept dwarven money and possible goods. You know, easy way to lure mercenaries or adventurers to the domain would be, you know, promising them, you know, just expertly made dwarven gear and stuff like that. So lots of opportunities there. So again, on the overworld, I think, you know, everyone or a lot of people would love to have the dwarves as allies, or at least, you know, trade partners. So there's plenty of opportunity there. And I think, you know, you definitely hold the power in the bargaining there, because you really don't need them, or at least you can pretend that you don't need them. So they need your goods, I think, more than the other way around. But, you know, there could be some opportunities either way there, and certainly strengthening some of the existing trade routes could be great as well. Again, the lack of any wizard cultivating any sources possible here, that could be something that is, you know, if you as the Overthane can somehow cultivate a relationship there, whoever that might be, someone that can earn the dwarves' trust, you know, their magic, as far as like domain spells and stuff go, could again also go a long way in maybe helping deal with the Orog threat. So there's lots of possibilities there. A fun domain. So certainly, again, if you love dwarves and, you know, wanted the experience of running a dwarven nation, this is a great one for you. But let us know your thoughts in the comments, guys. Have you run Baruk-Azhik as a domain, or have you adventured in and around there? Let us know in the comments. Thanks so much as always. Like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one. Take care.